Right. Good evening, everybody. My name is Councillor Edith Macaulay, and I'm the chair of this committee. And I think before we make a start, it'd be good to do an introduction so that we know who is who, because it's a new committee after the election, and there are some new faces here tonight. So we'll start with Paul.
I'm Paul Kohler, councillor in Wimbledon Town Centre. And Dundonald.
I'm Jill, and I'm only a councillor in Cricket Green, nowhere else.
I'm Mike Brunt, councillor in Abbey Ward, and I defended Dundonald because I used to be a councillor there, so I don't want the name lost.
To Martin Welton, I'm a councillor in Pollard Hill.
Samantha MacArthur, and I'm a councillor in Wimbledon Park.
Hi everyone, Robert Page, councillor in West Barnes.
Hello, I'm Jill Hall, I'm a councillor in Wimbledon Park.
Hello, I'm James Williscroft, I'm a councillor in Lower Morden.
I'm Caroline Charles, and I'm a councillor in Ravensbury.
Hi, I'm Helena Dollimore, and I'm the councillor for St Helier since.
Thank you all, and I think thank you very much for introducing yourself. We'll start off with the next item on the agenda, which is, are there any apologies for absence? No? No, it looks as if everybody is here tonight. We move on to agenda item number 3. Are there any declarations of interest at all? Nope. Good. Now we move on to the next item, which is minutes of the last meeting. Obviously, the minutes were from the last administration, where we will look at if there are any matters arising, and if there are any matters arising, please let me know. So I think they're on page 1 and 2. Does anybody have any questions or observations? Yeah, because this is a new committee. So can we agree the minutes of the meeting to be signed as duly written on the paper? Is that agreed? Thank you. I'll sign the minutes now. We move on swiftly to the main item on the agenda, as you can see, and it's the report on the proposed draft trading policy. So I'll ask Caroline now to speak on this paper. Caroline, are you there?
Yes, I'm here, Chair. I don't know if you can hear me.
Thank you.
Thank you, members, and welcome to the Licensing Committee for all of you who joined us. I'm just here to present a paper that I presented to the previous committee on the 24th of February. At that committee, the members approved to go for public consultation for our proposed new street trading policy. This is the new policy, Chair, that we're introducing. We've never had a policy in Merton, and we outlined our reason for doing so at the previous committee and also in this committee report that we've produced. So basically, this is a new street trading policy which sets out the new standards and procedures that the licensing authority will be considering when processing any which is detailed on pages 9 to 48 of the agenda. The activities that are carried out under the street trading policy are regulated under the London Local Authorities Act 1990. And these are the street trading pitches that we issue out in Merton, tables and chairs on the highway, market stores, and shopfront licenses. As I stated earlier, Chair, the draft policy was approved for consultation on the 24th February, and we carried out the consultation between 11th of March and 31st of May. We consulted on all the key stakeholders, particularly existing license holders, the ones that are we are statutory required to consult with. So it was the existing license holders, the highway authority, ward councillors, and all the police and the fire authority as well. But we actually went above and beyond that, and we consulted with all other key interested parties. And the list is provided in the report here, which is on paragraph 3.2 of the report. During the consultation period, we received 8 responses on the online survey that we carried out, which was published on our website. We also received 3 direct responses, and these are detailed on pages 52. The majority of the people that commented on the draft policy were in favour. They were supportive of a new street trading policy in Merton. A number that responded to the policy, Chair, talked about the obstruction of putting any tables and chairs on the pavement, and there were obviously concerns about the recommended space that we've provided, which is 2 meters clearance. But we have actually the 2 meters clearance that we've provided is actually above the national standard, which is 1.5 meters. There were concerns raised about the placing of advert boards on the highway, on the pavement for pedestrians, and we've actually, under the London Authorities Act, we haven't got powers to regulate that. But what we do is, if we get complaints, we speak to our colleagues in planning and highways to help us carry out the appropriate enforcement. And our colleagues in highways and planning do actually take the lead on that, and we just collaborate if we get any complaints, because we haven't got any enforcement powers. We also had comments in relation to the council strategy on climate change, and we've actually, by introducing this policy, we are contributing to the council strategy on climate change. We are proposing to improve air quality by any street traders that are operating vehicles for street trading purposes to actually comply with the new Euro 6 emissions, which are actually been approved by European Commission, and that's what our colleagues in the air quality team are actually proposing. So we've actually put that into our policy to actually help to improve that. But majority of the street traders in Merton actually use electric bollards when they're carrying out street trading activities. So this street trading policy, we are just asking members to consider it, and if it's approved, can refer it to the next council meeting, which is on the 14th of September. And if it's approved by the full council, it will come into force on the 1st of January next year. This is the summary of the report, Chair. I'm happy to answer any questions at this stage. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Caroline. Now Caroline has given a good presentation on the actual document itself. I will now open the meeting for any member of the group now here today. If you have any questions, if you could raise your hand. Yes, I'll take the first question from you, Councillor Dolimo.
Thank you, Caroline, and
Can I say if we do 2 questions at a time so it doesn't confuse anybody? Okay, thank you.
Thanks, Caroline, and thanks to the team for all of their work on this policy document and the consultation as well that's followed. I've got 2 questions that are linked to the policy. A number of the respondents to the consultation have raised the 2-meter gap and whether that is enough for both disabled people, people with physical impairments, but also people who are walking with a pushchair. And I appreciate that the response of the council cites the national guidelines. Now, those of us who have the papers printed, we can't click the link as to which the national guidelines hyperlinks to, but it would be good to know which national guidelines, because I note that the Mayor of London guidelines are 3 meters. So I just wondered how we come to that decision, given we are a London borough, and are we confident that this is an inclusive approach, the 2 meters for pushchair users and others with physical impairments? Also, on the list of permittable trading commodities, I note that there's a number of electrical items. And, you know, from our discussions with the Safer Neighbourhood teams, I'm aware that there are issues with shops, broker shops, where you can buy laptops, mobile phones secondhand. And there is a concern among the Metropolitan Police that that is actually fueling household burglaries. People are able to burgle a house, quickly pass on the stolen goods, and they are sold off at those places. So I just wondered, have we thought about that in relation to these stalls, because the temporary nature makes it perhaps even more vulnerable to that kind of thing? And did the police have any comments in that respect? Perhaps we could specifically pick up on them with, you know, do you request ID from people who are selling you stolen goods to sell on the stall? Thanks.
Does anyone else want to? Yes, Councillor Blunt.
My question, it relates to the installation of a number of dining places on street in parking bays that were installed after to promote street food after the pandemic. And I wonder whether were they covered in the first place by the licensing on streets in Merton, and would they be covered under this new policy? And to what extent there's been a study of pollution, because a number of these are right next to the roadside, and some of these streets can be busy, and they're becoming busier again as the economy has opened up. So I wonder to what extent we are regulating or monitoring the air quality around those street drinking stands and dining stations, basically, because they seem to have popped up across the borough, and I wondered whether it was licensed or not in the first place.
Thank you very much, Councillor Bond. Caroline, you've got these 2 questions. Can you please let us have your comments? Thank you.
Thank you, councillors. And I've got my colleague here, the lead officer in street trading, David Ryan, who's going to help me pick up some of the questions that you've asked. So the first question, in terms of the national standards, these are the national standards that are set by the government. And basically, you know, the national standards were actually implemented when we, with the street trading, obviously the 1.5 guidelines, those are the government guidelines, and we had to follow the government guidelines, because it actually shows you the pictures and everything that, you know, in terms of the distance that's allowed. So that is 1.5. We've gone above that guideline that was given. I know the mayor's made recommendations, but I think if you look into it in line with the national guidelines, you will see that the guidelines that have been provided by the government is what we've followed, and we have to be careful that if we go above and beyond, you know, we could get a legal challenge on that, because at the moment we've gone above the national guidelines. And what the officers do as well, they do actually go out, and we don't just grant a street trading license when it comes in. Officers do go out, carry out the measurements, and make sure that there's adequate space provided for pedestrians including disabled people, included people who are walking through with a pushchair. So all those measures are factored in, but we've given 2 meters as, you know, a baseline that we will look at. If there's a need to go above that, then obviously the officers will have to make that professional judgment in terms of whether they can grant a license or not. So I hope that answers any questions. David, have you got any further comments to add on that, please?
Thank you, Caroline. Just to add that we look at 2 pieces of legislation when we're looking at site visits for here. So the councillor's question in regards to the seating areas inside the parking bays. There's 2 bits of legislation that cover street trading as such. There's the London Local Authorities Act, which we're concerned with here. And then there's the Business and Planning Act, which covers pavement licenses. And they were brought in as a special measure during the pandemic, and they look set to continue going forward. And the seating areas in the roads are actually covered under that legislation. So it's separate to this policy and won't be covered under our policy because it's 2 different bits of legislation. When we're looking at these sites, as Caroline said, we take a judgment of how much space is actually in the area. The 3 metre guideline set out by the Mayor of London is indicative. It wouldn't cover every street in the borough. Some of the pavements are smaller than that. So we have to look at what's actually suitable for Merton. And for many years, Highways has requested a 2 metre clearance as a national standard. The guidelines are 1.5 minimum. We've always gone up to 2 metres to make sure we have sufficient space there for pedestrians to come through.
Does that answer your question, Councillor? Would you like to clarify before we move on to the second question? Through you, Chair.
Yeah, thank you. It helps. It goes some way. I'm still a little unsure of the difference between the government national guidelines and the Mayor of London guidelines. I don't know if you can shed any more light on that, or what neighbouring boroughs do in their policies. You know, do most London boroughs do 2 metres? Do most follow the Mayor of London guidance? It'd be helpful to understand that.
Obviously, as David explained, with the Business and Planning Act, which is a different, and that had to be introduced due to the pandemic. That was introduced in 2020 because a lot of premises were being pushed in order to keep the economy going. They were being pushed to have pavement licenses. So, and the guideline in that, which is the later legislation, is 1.5, and most authority went for that. But I'm aware that some authorities in the London Borough have gone for either 1.5 or 2 meters. We do issue licenses in Richmond as well, and that's what we've gone for. We know some neighbouring authorities have gone for 2 meters, but some authorities have gone for the 1.5. That was a recommendation that was made in the new legislation that was only introduced in 2020. But I'm happy to send you some comparison if you'd like to have that data after the meeting.
I think, thank you. I think I would also add that we have to be mindful of the new legislation, because one of the things we must remember that we don't want to be challenged in court when there's an appeal in terms of this, because as the officer has said, I think it is quite clear we have to look at what other boroughs do, like Richmond and Kingston and Wandsworth. So I don't know if that answers your question in full, Councillor Dolimon.
Yeah, I'm happy to go with officers' recommendation if they think this makes sense given what our neighbouring boroughs are doing and this general feel of our streets, which obviously does vary between London boroughs as well. Some boroughs have much wider pavements, for example. Then very happy to go with officers' recommendation on this as the experts.
I think we move on to the question from Councillor Brunt.
Okay, thank you. I think the next question, Chair, it was to do with the commodities. I'm going to hand over to David to explain how the rationale behind the commodities that we have proposed and the concern in relation to electrical goods. So, David, could you just expand on that, please?
Yes, any electrical goods that are sold, we don't generally accept them on market stalls or those outside of shops. So what you're looking at there is the sources of the goods would be identified either as the wholesaler or from the shop premises itself. So we wouldn't have people standing out on a market stall selling, battered second-hand electrical items. There's a safety issue there. We liaise with our colleagues in trade and standards for any goods that are resold. So generally speaking, a few years ago, we used to have some come through, but we put a stop to it, and we've not actually been approached in the last 7 to 8 years for electrical items to be sold outside. If they were, they would have to be in connection to a shop. And obviously, the police haven't responded to the consultation to have any concerns about those items either. So obviously, we take a note of the information you've given us, and we'd add that into our consideration when we're looking at the commodities presented.
Thank you. I think that's answers the question quite fully. We now move on to 2 more questions from Councillor Stephen Mercy, who's online, and then after that, Councillor Willis Croft. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. I don't know if you can hear me properly. Am I audible? Is that okay?
Yeah, I can hear you, Councillor.
Okay, thank you very much. In the minutes of the last meeting, it was agreed that organisations will be consulted in addition to being published on the council website and in the local press. And the licensing officer agreed to residents' associations being added to the list. However, it seems that residents' associations were not consulted on the policy. Is that correct? And if so, why not?
Councillor Mercy. Councillor James Williscoff, can you ask your question now, please?
I haven't actually got a question to ask, Chair. Maybe it means someone else.
Okay, if you don't have a question, I will take Councillor Paul Kohler. Thank you.
Thank you. I had 2 questions. I think one's been answered. It's my understanding that most of the London authorities have a 2-metre rule. If you just confirm that, I think the norm is 2 metres within London, notwithstanding the Mayor of London's indicative 3-metre rule. If you could confirm that, that would be good. Well, I think we always have done so already. The second point is, and it's related to the councillor's question there. We've consulted lots of bodies. I know we've consulted all we have to, and I'm completely in favour of the trading standards policy. But it does concern me that we haven't consulted those who represent those who are mobility impaired. It's not obvious to me we've consulted groups that speak for the disabled or the old. And I wonder, just going forward, I'm not suggesting we now overturn this policy, but in future, I think we do need to think that where we go further than the statutory requirements of consultation, it does seem a glaring omission here in this list of consultees. We've not approached such groups. Thank you.
I think in addition to that, can I just add my own comments as well? Having looked at the papers, obviously I'm new to looking at this committee. I am very mindful in terms of consultation process, because sometimes, you do have the usual suspects who will get involved in answering consultations. And I was a bit worried, thinking that there was only 11 responses, because in most of the consultations which I have participated in, I've seen a higher figure, and I probably need to be reassured what the threshold of the consultation of people who have been asked for their views. Perhaps you could explain that. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. The consultation was what we've listed on page 5. Most of the people consulted. I agree with the councillor earlier that the Residents Association, when it was a query that was raised by one of the councillors, when we sent out the consultation, we did ask the ward councillor, any Residents Association, that contact them to actually make them aware that the consultation was out, because one of the councillors raised the query because they were actually being contacted by the Resident Association. So we did send out the consultation to the councillors and also asked for that information so that they could alert their wards that the policy was out for consultation on the website. The policy was on the website, and we sent out to the list of everyone that's listed on there. In terms of key stakeholders, we did receive from the consultation. We did receive on the I'm just looking at the page, Chair, where the disabled somebody representing disabled people has actually commented on the policy, and that's detailed. I'm just looking through my. It's on the. It's one of the feedbacks that we received, and we've actually attached it to the agenda. I'm just trying to find what page number it is on. If you just bear with me. The comments are actually on page 55 of the agenda. We got a person by the name of Mr. Turner, who's actually made some comments on behalf of disabled people, deaf and disabled people. So they managed to get the consultation document through our website, and the fact that we publicized it as well. So they managed to obviously look at the policy and made their comments. So we managed to get a hold of them. We have, in terms of the statutory requirements, we've obviously done what we need to do legally, but we've actually gone above and beyond that and consulted with key stakeholders, from the list that I've provided. So I'm quite happy to be guided. If you want us to go back and consult again, I'm quite happy to do that. Helps.
Councillor Kohler, do you want to come back on that? Because I'm not too sure whether it's something this meeting or members who are here will be happy to do.
As I said, I'm not asking for you to go back or to overturn the policy if we accept it. I'm just saying, I don't want you to be defensive on this. I'm just saying for the future, I think as a sign of respect and acknowledgement of those agencies that represent such people, we should, as a norm, go consult them. Whether or not they found out about it's not my point. My point is, as an issue of respect, I think we should consult those that speak for the elderly, those and other mobility impaired people. It just strikes me as good practice for the future, but not something to disrupt what we've done thus far.
Okay.
I think it's a good question. I think what you said, we need to take into account all of our communities to make sure that we as a council is doing the right thing and not to leave anybody out. And I think that's if the meeting here is in agreement with me, if you feel that's the way it should be in the future, I do feel that's the way it should be in the future. So do you want to come back on that before I take the next person?
Yeah, I agree totally. We've consulted the list that we've provided, but I agree if you'd like us, the policy can be reviewed again at any time, and that's another thing I wanted to explain to you members and the chair. If you feel that when it comes into force, or if you wanted us to go back and consult other people, that's not a problem. We can do that. So I totally agree, and I'm quite happy to do that if that would satisfy members to say that we've consulted all the other extra groups. I'm happy to be guided.
Put it to the members who are here tonight to see if you feel that this should be done now. Councillor Jill Manley, do you want to say something?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I mean, I think as a disabled person myself, and I do use on quite a lot a mobility scooter when I'm in extreme pain. I will say that there are many streets where it is actually really a nightmare to negotiate between tables and chairs, bike racks, huge, great illuminated signs, and people and pushchairs. And I would say that living in a community where there are very many elderly women at the cottages, they all have the same complaint, is that there's not enough space to negotiate, often on many busy high streets. So if there was a way of maybe approaching a couple of groups like Age UK, or maybe a care home where people are often, you know, going out shopping in their buggies or whatever, just to back up the consultation process, rather than sort of revisit the whole consultation process, but maybe just do an additional, if there was time and if people were minded. But it is an issue, definitely.
I think, okay, I'll take Councillor Bond. Thank you.
Sorry. Yes, in terms of how we know about groups to consult with, I think that that's our responsibility as councillors to inform the council if we're aware of groups. I used to work for the MS Society. I know there's a local MS Society support group here in Merton. I wonder if the borough knows of that. So there are other organisations that are involved with people who have mobility issues, and I think that we need to make sure that the council always has an up-to-date list of those groups for consultation, so they could be top of the list when any notification is sent out. So, but I'd agree that I don't think we should hold up this policy now. I think we should go forward with this, but I think we should just, in any review of the policy and certainly any future consultations, not only for licensing, but all issues about street furniture and the like, we need to cast the net wide, and it's our responsibility to notify, I think, officers of that, and that should be the starting point through our networks in our wards.
So a very important point which you have raised. I think that we should be mindful next time to take into consideration. We don't want, I'm sure I'm speaking for you all here, in terms of the consensus of the meeting, not to go back, in delaying the whole process. Because if you look at the recommendation B, it says approve this street trading policy attached at Appendix A of the report, subject to any amendments required by this committee. I don't know if that's what we're looking at or in addition in future. So I would like to hear some of your views in here. See.
Hello, Chair. I'm merely raising the question whether we can proceed without the consultation with residents' associations, given the decision that was taken in the last committee meeting.
Oh, thank you, Councillor. What I explained earlier was that we did, when we sent it out for the policy for consultation, because the issue was raised by one of the local councillors at that meeting in February, when we sent it out to the councillors, we did say to them to raise it with local residents associations in their ward to make sure that we're aware that the policy was now out for consultation.
Just to add to what Caroline, sorry, Chair, just to add to what Caroline said, we did send the links to the consultation out to a large number of resident associations in the borough. It's not all of them. We can appreciate there's probably more that we've not heard of, but we did send it out. What's listed in the report is the main large public bodies that people will be aware of. Not every single person that's listed that was on our distribution list. So there could be associations that never received it, but we did send it out to a large number to try and get some feedback from local residents.
If it helps, we can produce, we can send you the list of the associations that we sent to Councillor, if that helps.
Dolly,
Okay.
do you want to come back?
Yeah, I just wanted to say I think we should proceed with it as it is, and in future look to consult more widely. I think with regards to residents associations, it was obviously sent to a list of residents associations. It was also advertised on the website, and it was also circulated to ward councillors who work closely with residents associations. So I do feel enough has been done in this instance, but there's always room for improvement next time.
Yes, I think that's a fair point. I think it looks as if the consensus in the room is that we proceed with the three recommendations, A, B, and C. Are there any further questions before we take the recommendations?
Chair, I think.
If we could be, as part of, go ahead with the decision, but send all of us the list of resident associations that were included so that we can update the team if we're aware of resident associations in our areas, in our wards, that are not included. Because some of these organisations come and go. So that could be a way of doing an audit of who we consult with now through us.
Councillor Robert Page.
Yeah, I had a slightly minor question. You mentioned the vehicles would need to follow the Euro 6 standard set by the European Commission. I just want to check, is that the standard that will be used in the UK going forward? Is this, is that standard future-proofed for the UK?
Yeah, that is just the baselines. If any standards or any new legislation come in that supersedes any, even what we've recommended in the policy, if the government change, those are the standards that we will take. But at the moment, that's just the baseline. So if the government introduces any new legislation, that would supersede anything that we've put in the policy. So we'll have to go with the latest legislation.
Thank you, Commissioner. I see you've got your hand up again. Thank you. Councillor Mercy, are you there?
Yes, sorry. Hello. I wanted to ask a question about the cycle paths, which the Merton Cycle Campaign were raising the question about cycle paths and footpaths being protected from obstruction by street traders. A response was made to the point that the repurposing of parking bays, road space, and placing of A boards on the highway and cycle infrastructure is controlled by the highway section. And my question was whether this means that the issue of a license to a street trader in no way impedes the highway section in prohibiting a street trader from operating if, for example, they want to set up across a cycle lane.
Yeah,
a long question, sorry.
No, it's all right, Councillor. I'll let David Ryan chip in. Thank you for that. So when we receive an application, we have to assess the location, and we always work closely with the highways section before any street trading license can be issued. They are actually the statutory consultees. So there's a lot of factors that we look at. Public safety is the key, and making sure, like we've just talked about, the 2-meter rule. Those are the key things that we try and look at. Visibility, the location, and also the commodities that they're doing, the actual, if it's a van or a store, the actual size of it, to make, before we can even grant it, we consult the we consult planning. Those are the key responsible authorities that feed into the consultation process before we can grant a license. But I'll let David Ryan come in as well to explain in further or elaborate further. Thank you, David.
Yeah, Councillor, just to add to that, in the borough, there's one licensed site that's near a cycle lane. Anyone else shouldn't be anywhere near it. That site in particular has been granted by Transport for London because of the Highway Authority for the Red Route. So again, as Caroline stated, the Highway Authority gives ultimate permission as to whether something can go there or not. As the licensing authority, we're responsible for issuing the license, but they would determine if they say there's not enough room, that's the end of the matter. We can't issue the license. So if they feel at any point there's impingement on cycle lanes or anywhere else that could affect the public, they will refuse. And we'll be guided by that in our decision.
Thank you.
Thank you. Any further questions from anyone who hasn't spoken yet? Anybody else wants to add a comment or make a relevant point? No? Shall we look at the 3 recommendations, which are on page 3? And if you're happy, could you let me know, that so we can go ahead with those 3 recommendations as listed. Agreed? Caroline, as you can see, it's definitely a consensus among members here tonight that they are in agreement with the recommendations. But in addition to that, obviously in future, we need to take into account all the relevant points which has been raised tonight for future consultation, so that we will not be challenged by any groups from our community, and our responsibilities as councillors here. I'm sure we all know what our responsibilities are. We've got to ensure that we meet the needs and requirements of our residents, of our communities, and to ensure that we're doing the right thing, and also making sure that when a decision is made, we make the right decision so that we are not challenged in court. Because I know what the action is when matters are taken to court and we're challenged. And it's not a very cheap thing to do. It's a very expensive matter. So we are agreeing the 3 recommendations as per the document tonight. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, members. Thank you.
Very aware that Councillor Kohler did say that, he sent an email, but I was going to come to that lastly to make, as it is my first meeting, I want to make sure that we look through the agenda properly, and we only have one item on the agenda which was relevant, but I am very much aware that Councillor Kohler wants to say something, but can I ask you to make it briefly? And if you can, I don't want you to spend about half an hour talking about something. I know we all, want to go home, but if you can sort of speed things up, I would be very grateful. Thank you. Can you proceed, please?
I'll try not to be too verbose. Okay. Two quick points I want to make. They are quick, but I think licensing committee gives us a chance to set policy as well as just agreeing things. And I am not sure we've used it for that well in the last 4 years. So 2 things I want us to think about, please. One is Philip Colvin QC in his presentation he gave us on licensing policy talked about the fact that you could use licensing policy creatively, and he advertised his own chapter in a publication which I got out, which is fascinating. And I wonder, and I've asked Caroline this for the future, whether we can think about looking at that chapter and looking about the regeneration of Morden, and whether using licensing creatively could help not be the whole solution to the issues in Morden, but one of the solutions. And all I'm suggesting is we as a committee actively go forward with these ideas and think about it. So I've asked Caroline if she could sort of present something talking about the challenges that would pose for a future committee. She is happy to do so, as I understand it, but I think it would be this committee to say they want to do that. My second point is, after 4 years, I'm embarrassed to say, I only realized recently that the website where it details the license applications is very poor. We had a problem in Wimbledon where it looked like the Travelodge was going for a 24-hour speakeasy type bar because it had a 24-hour license. It wasn't obvious to anyone looking at the public website that from 11 p.m. at night until 10 a.m. in the morning, that 24-hour license was limited to residents of the hotel. That set hares racing up and down Hartfield Road, which we didn't need to set racing. Yeah, that's a good point. So all I'm saying is, I've asked Caroline for the website, so can we put more details of applications on the website? Because at the moment they are so minimal that they are completely misleading. But that's a good point, Martin.
Does anybody have any comments to what he has said? But do you think, I know you sent a copy of the report which you're talking about, and Caroline is quite happy to sort of look into that. But do you want to share that with members of this committee now, or tomorrow, or whenever it is?
I've given a copy to Caroline. I think it will be distributed when we discuss it, but I'm happy to send it out to everybody.
Yeah, I think it'd be a good thing for everybody to see. I think I spent about half an hour trying to digest it, in my spare time whilst watching the tennis. But I assume that once you sort of circulate to members of this committee, and then Caroline will let us, have views on it. I think that's a fair point. I don't think, I don't know if Caroline want to say something on that briefly.
Yes, Councillor. Yeah, I've been communicating with Councillor Collar, and quite happy to look at the nighttime economy. I did point out that obviously extra resources will be needed to that, because we need to carry out a study. I'm aware other councils have actually forecast and funded some studies to see how their nighttime economy operates, because we need to look at the footfall at night. And we need to look at what venues and what kind of activities they're providing to see whether there will be opportunities to be able to provide different style activities, like either food-led premises, or whether we could do a late market store, have that attraction of early nighttime economy than the standard ones. So there's a lot of work that needs to be done to be able to capture that data. We need to look at the gateway, what type of transportation, people in means of dispersal later at night. So yes, I have fed back to Councillor Collar, and obviously we'll have to work in collaboration with our colleagues, such as in economic development, Future Merton. So we all have to get linked in together so that we can look at a piece of work and get that data back for us to be able to now feed back and actually advise the members how the nighttime economy looks like now, and what opportunities would be there, in terms of licensable activities that we can look at promoting to bring back the nighttime economy. So that's the kind of work that we need to do.
Actually, did you want to say something?
Yeah, could I ask that a formal report on this goes to the next committee of licensing before we agree this? Yeah.
Councillor Kohler is saying, does anybody else have any further? Councillor Manley.
Thank you. I would concur with my learned friend here on my right. I don't know how many times that will happen in our 4 years. However, I came away from the licensing training completely thrilled and delighted by the fact that we can get possibly quite creative in terms of improving our levels of variety, shall we say, of street shop fronts and businesses, and encouraging entrepreneurship. And there has to be a balance between making it very difficult to obtain license without erring on the side of being too sort of wishy-washy about it too. But I think in terms of developing local policy, in terms of how many barbershops we're going to have in one road, as opposed to encouraging other forms of business by being a little bit more balanced, I think this is definitely one of the routes we can take.
Good point. Anybody else wants to make a contribution? It looks as if, oh, yes, Councillor Bond.
Well, I'd be interested to see the paper, and I'm enthusiastic as well about trying to generate a local economy. But we just need to be sure that before putting resources into surveying and looking into it, that we can, we need to find out what the community wants. Because some years ago, and I looked around the room and realised that it was before anyone else who was on the council, but when we tried to, first time we tried to regenerate Malden, Abbotsbury Road was going to be a pedestrianised market, and there were bollards put in with electricity supplies and all sorts of things. And soon after it started, the market's traders stopped coming because there wasn't the footfall. So we need to make sure that we're not generating an ideal situation that we see without taking the community with us or being led by the community about what they'd like to see in their areas. So I think that's important.
Important point. Yes, that's fine. And can I have Councillor Cobb? Thanks.
Thanks. Yeah, I'd just like to say I agree too. And I think that as time goes on, we'll see a few more shops closing down, unfortunately. And if we can look more creatively at enabling pop-up bars or, licensed premises, something like, I don't know if you remember the Sound Lounge, which is very close to here. When that was open, that was a really good use of space. When it was in Wimbledon, we went several times. It was great. So yes, that's a sort of creative thing we could look at doing. So yeah, I agree. Thanks.
Right. Well, it's a typical example, Tooting Market, which has been revitalized and which I go to every Friday. Absolutely. Anybody else wants to make any further comment? I think I must say, I'm very impressed with the behavior of you all. It's been very impressive. And I noticed that you all have great knowledge of licensing. And I'm very grateful for your participation at this meeting today. It's been really a good meeting. Although we will only have one item on the agenda, we'll see what happens at our next meeting. And I want to thank you all for coming, and it's good to meet some of our new councillors. Welcome to the House, and thank you for being a councillor and participating in this committee. And thank you to the officers for all their hard work. Can you hold on? Thank you to the officers for all their hard work and for all their help and the direction which they're leading us, because they're the experts and we have to be guided by them. And then as councillors, we make the final decision, which is quite good. And I think that's what a local authority should be like. So anybody else? Is a consensus that you all agree to the recommendations which you have made, and it looks as if there is no dissent in the room. Am I correct? Agreed. Thank you. Oh, Paul, you still want to spill? I can't get you to stop talking.
Just really quickly, I set up the other question for Caroline wanted to report on what she was going to do with the website. So I was asking a question about the website because Caroline has some ideas how she'll improve the website, and she wanted to briefly say what they were.
Oh, yeah.
Caroline, do you want to briefly say, make a comment on that?
Yes. So I've responded to Councillor Collar. In terms of that particular license application, obviously we've found that we can actually, it's a quick fix that we can put on the website. If a premises is going to be operating 24 hours and obviously just opening for their guests and their residents and guests only, that information can be quite explicit on the public register. So we've also found out how we can have information on the website in terms of objectives, because if somebody applies for a license, they have to propose some objectives, which are the 4 licensing objectives, which are the prevention of crime and disorder, public safety, prevention of public nuisance, and protection. All that information that they would propose as an application, we could look at that. So we are currently working with our IT section and the project team, because we are moving to one system. We do provide licensing activities in Merton, we do it for Richmond and Wandsworth. So we're now migrating into one system, and all that will form part of a bigger project that we're doing. We're hoping to deliver that towards the end of this year. But in terms of main information on the application, we've looked at a quicker fix to try and provide that information.
Councillor Manley, did you want to say something quickly again?
I could project, I suppose, but I just wanted to give out some verbal roses to licensing. My neighbour applied for a temporary events notice on Monday morning online. By Monday afternoon, it had been approved and she'd paid for it. And she said it has never been so quick and so efficient. And she thanks you.
Well, thank you so much. I'll feed that back to the team. Greatly appreciated.
I think that's a good idea in terms of the website, because it explains to people to have an understanding on the Crime and Disorder Act, which a lot of people are not aware of. So that's good. Any further comments? Have I missed anything? I don't think I have. Right. I think we can definitely thank you all for coming to the meeting and